Before we start, I just wanted to say how fast the year has gone and how much I've learned from you, Katherine. You're wise, you're writerly, but the one thing I really thank you for is teaching me about boy bands. Because I am going to seem so hip and cool. Your turn.
Well, my very hilarious mentor is Mary Pat Kane, and I'm Katherine. And we chose to write about our fathers for very different reasons, and it seemed like we had a lot in common, and our adoration for our fathers was that. And yeah, our pieces are dedicated to our fathers. My father, Cesar Ortiz, and her father, Oliver Kane. I'd use my mother's makeup on him. He'd lay still as I rambled on, pretending we were in a distant world. Once my mother had discovered us, she'd quickly take them from me, and he'd cradle me protectively. He's always protected me. He failed to admit our own reality, shielding us from the raw truth. He gave me a life where I wasn't forced to worry. I wasn't forced to worry about the things that seemed so evident and clear and there. He became our knight, who shielded us from what frightened us, who wore an armor fashioned of bravery and bold honesty.
My father was very protective of me, too much so, I thought. Once when I was in my late 20s and living away in a big city by myself, I went back to Rochester, New York to visit and was crossing the street across from our house. My father ran onto the porch, frantically waving his hands and going, Mary Pat, don't cross now, don't cross. I think there might be a car like a couple miles away. And I got across and I said, Dad, it's so embarrassing, you know? But there are nights on Court Street in Brooklyn on my corner when those cars are whizzing by that I wish I had someone over there worrying me to safety.
I waited for him. After school, I'd sit and wait for him to arrive. Once I heard the jingling of keys, I would rush towards the door, never catching him off guard because he expected it. He would prop me onto his shoulders while at the park to avoid the dogs that once terrified me. Although he can't prop me on his shoulders anymore, metaphorically, he does every day.
Her father is in our audience. My father's in heaven. Very high up, though, very high up. With the archangels. My dad took me out of school sometimes. I don't know how he did this with the nuns. And he took me on his rounds. You'd think he was the editor of the paper, but he worked in the classified ad section in the back, and he would go out in rural areas to collect ads from big companies. He loved that paper, so that's why I always thought, it was his paper. We would drive out into these small towns, and whenever we would go into an establishment, a tractor dealership, say, everyone would just light up and holler, Ollie, where have you been? Don't stay away so long. And it was such a good feeling to be the child of someone who walked into a place and made people happy.
He fears these foreign words tangling themselves in his mouth. He never wanted to seem weak. He was and still seems to be the strongest person I know. I used to brag that he could be able to lift a car. Although that's probably not true, I've never really doubted him because he's never given me a reason to.
My dad worked in the want ads or classified ads for many years. And after so long, his boss was finally going to retire. And he wouldn't be assistant manager anymore, he'd become the manager. That was important to him. He had been there for years and had in effect been doing the job for years. He was very excited. But when the big guys called him up to the top floor to talk to him, they told him they had hired a young man instead to be manager of the department, right out of college. We love you, Ollie. We couldn't do this without you. Don't you even think of going. We need you to train him. They broke my father's heart. But where could he go? He had been there since he was 18 years old. He had an 8th grade education, and his wife was sick. Where could he go? They broke my heart, and I still try to forgive them. Try.
My father is my hero, not the type to wear a cape or tights, but the type to sacrifice and struggle on the account of others. The desire for our future is what was forced him to come. Despite the outcome of his own future, that's what makes him a hero. He came to a country with a foreign tongue and prevailed. He survived through the scarring winter climates and the unknown. He has a willingness to accept change and make something from nothing. He left behind everything he knew in another country to work as nothing in the land of false hopes and dreams that remain untouched. And every day, I work to make his sacrifices mean something because they mean everything.
is too much. My dad would cook huge meals for us. He loved nothing better than feeding a group. When I walked down the street with him, people would come up and they'd tell him the whole story of their lives, and I'd say, "Dad, who was that guy? Why didn't you introduce me?" He'd say, "I never saw him before." My father wasn't my hero, like Katherine's. He was my friend and colleague, and mostly the person who gave me my values. He is my model for considerateness, I truly hope, generosity, honesty, faithfulness, love of animals and people, and most of all, laughter. I can still hear his wonderful laugh and see his eyes light up. Happy Father's Day, Ali Kane, and thank you for everything.